I didn't think saying yes to a weekend hike would change anything between us, but part of me hoped it would. It's not like this was our first trip. Evan and I had been doing things like this since freshman year of college. Road trips, beach, weekends, late-night drives with no real destination. He was the kind of friend who made the world feel bigger, like you could breathe easier around him. Still, there was something different about this time. Or maybe the difference was me. Maybe I was just tired of pretending I didn't feel more. The plan was simple. Hike a moderate trail in the Berkshires, stay overnight at a lean-to near the summit, and come back down before Sunday afternoon. He'd texted me 2 days earlier. "You free this weekend?" I found this sick trail. Real quiet. Barely anyone around. That last part stuck with me. Barely anyone around. Like a confession waiting for air. We left early Saturday morning, his old Jeep creaking as it wound up the narrow mountain road. The windows were down, and Evan kept tapping the steering wheel to a playlist he refused to admit he curated for the drive. Half indie rock, half nostalgic hits from our high school days. I stole a glance at him as he mouthed along to the lyrics of an old Arctic Monkeys song, his hair tousled by the wind, the faintest trace of stubble lining his jaw. I looked away before he could catch me. "Still can't believe you agreed to this," he said, glancing at me with that grin he always wore when he was pushing my limits. "You? Hiking? Sleeping outside? I thought your idea of roughing it was a hotel without room service." I rolled my eyes but smiled. I liked nature. Just filtered through a screen, and maybe a glass window. He laughed, and the sound of it settled somewhere deep in my chest. I wished I could bottle that laugh. Keep it close. The further we drove, the more the air changed. Cooler, crisper, filled with pine and something earthy I couldn't name. Evan talked most of the way up, and I let him. I liked the way he filled silences, never needing to ask if I was okay. I wasn't, not really, but around him, it almost didn't matter. At the trailhead, we unloaded our gear, and I caught him, double-checking my straps before we set off. "You sure you packed light?" he asked, tightening a buckle near my shoulder. His fingers brushed my collarbone. Just for a second. I froze. "Yeah," I murmured, not meeting his eyes. "I'm good." It was nothing. Just a casual touch. But it stayed with me long after we started walking. Long after the trail narrowed, the trees thickened, and the silence between us grew comfortable again. Somewhere deep down, I think I knew. This hike wouldn't just take us into the woods. It would take us somewhere I hadn't dared to go with him before, and I didn't know if I was ready. We'd been friends for almost 6 years, since a mandatory group project in our first-year psych class threw us together. Everyone else had just exchanged numbers and split the workload. Evan naturally had suggested we all meet up at the rec center with pizza and a whiteboard like we were pitching a startup. Only I showed up. We ended up finishing the project on our own and somehow never stopped hanging out after that. He was everything I wasn't, easygoing, charming without trying. The kind of guy who made friends just by existing in a room. I was quieter, more deliberate, a little guarded. He never minded that. If anything, I think he liked pulling me out of my shell, one dumb joke or unexpected adventure at a time. "This trail's nothing," he said as we crossed a narrow wooden footbridge over a stream. "When I hiked the Adirondacks last fall, I had to practically drag my cousin up a ridge. Dude ate 3 Pop-Tarts and thought he was invincible." "Sounds familiar," I said. "Except you've upgraded from Pop-Tarts to Cliff Bars, so clearly you've matured." He grinned. "Only the finest cuisine for us today, my friend." The trail climbed steadily, weaving between mossy boulders and clusters of birch trees. Shafts of light filtered through the canopy, dappling his back as he walked ahead of me. Every so often he'd glance over his shoulder to make sure I was keeping up. I always was. I just liked watching him from behind, his easy stride, the way he swung his arms when he was telling a story. "You remember that camping trip, Senior?" "Year?" he asked, slowing his pace so we were walking side by side again. When Jordan fell asleep with his shoes on the fire pit? I snorted. You mean when you dared him to see how close he could get to the coals without burning them? Details, he said, waving a hand. It was a bonding experience. Besides, the guy learned a valuable lesson about rubber soles. There was something effortless about being around him. We'd spent so much time in each other's lives that the space between us felt natural, safe, except when it didn't. Except when he'd casually lean closer to show me something on his phone and I'd stop breathing. Or when he'd sling an arm around my shoulder during group photos and I'd have to fight not to lean in. I wasn't sure when it changed. When I stopped. Just admiring him and started wishing for something more. Maybe it was always there, quietly simmering under every joke and late-night text. Or maybe I'd just been in denial. About halfway up the trail, we paused at a small clearing. Evan dropped his pack and stretched, lifting his arms over his head, with a groan. His shirt lifted just enough to reveal a strip of skin above his waistband. Toned, tan, stupidly distracting. I looked away, suddenly very interested in my water bottle. You good? He asked, walking over and nudging my boot with his. Yeah, I said, maybe a little too fast. Just taking it in. He smiled and turned to face the view, rolling hills in every direction, the sun catching the edges of the trees like fire. It's peaceful up here, he murmured. Kind of makes you forget everything. Yeah, I said again, softer this time. It does. We hiked another hour before reaching the lean-to, a simple wooden structure nestled near a ridge overlooking the valley. It was rustic but dry. The only issue was immediately clear. One sleeping platform, Evan said, tossing his pack down. Guess we're getting cozy tonight. He said it without a second thought, but my stomach flipped anyway. I'd brought my sleeping bag. He had his. But the space was tight, meant for close quarters. Maybe a two-person setup if you didn't mind bumping into each other all night. He met my eyes and smirked. Unless you're scared I snore, I shook my head, forcing a casual laugh. Only if you start sleep-talking again. I still haven't recovered from that story you told me. In your dreams. That earned a full laugh from him, the kind that crinkled the corners of his eyes. And yet, when his gaze lingered just a second too long on mine, something shifted in the air. Just for a moment. Then he looked away, busying himself with unrolling his gear. But that glance, it stayed with me, nestled somewhere in my chest, blooming slow and quiet like something waiting to be named. We hadn't even finished setting up when the sky began to turn. I noticed it first, a hush falling over the woods, like nature was holding its breath. The leaves stopped rustling. The birds quieted. Then a low rumble echoed in the distance, and I looked up to see clouds darkening fast across the horizon. Evan glanced up, squinting. Wasn't supposed to rain today. Mountain weather, I said, tightening the tarp line over the lean-to. Changes fast. We worked quickly, securing our gear under the overhang and moving our packs out of reach of the inevitable downpour. Just as the last knot was tied, the first drops fell, fat, cold splashes against my skin. Within seconds, it was a full-on downpour, rain hammering the wooden roof and turning the trail into a muddy stream. Well, Evan said, shaking water from his hair as he ducked into the shelter. Guess we're stuck here for a while. The lean-to was just deep enough to keep the rain off us, but the open front let in gusts of wind that carried the cold with it. I shivered slightly, rubbing my arms as I sat cross-legged on my sleeping bag. Evan flopped down beside me, stretching out on his side with his head propped on one arm. You cold? I'm fine. You're lying, he said with a grin. I can see your goosebumps from here. Before I could answer, he scooted closer and threw his sleeping bag over both of us, draping it like a blanket. It was warm, too. Warm not from the material, but from the fact that he was now inches from me. His shoulder brushed mine. I could feel the heat of him through our jackets. His scent, pine, sweat, something faintly citrusy, settled around me like smoke. I held perfectly still, trying to focus on anything other than the fact that Evan was touching me. Willingly, comfortably, like it was no big deal. "You always tense up like that when you're cozy with a friend?" he asked, his tone teasing. "I'm not tense," I lied. He smirked, clearly unconvinced. "You're stiff as a rock. Relax, man. I don't bite." That was the problem. If he did, maybe this would be easier to manage. He shifted again, lying, flat now, and tucked one arm behind his head. His other hand rested dangerously close to mine, so close that I could feel the warmth radiating from his fingers. My heart thudded hard in my chest. I couldn't stop thinking about how easy this was for him, how every casual touch unraveled me a little more. I wanted to tell him. I wanted to blurt it out. How I couldn't stop thinking about the way he looked when he smiled, or how his voice dipped when he got serious, or how sometimes I caught myself staring too long when he wasn't looking. But I didn't, because if I said it, everything would change, and I wasn't sure I was brave enough to risk losing him. Instead, I turned toward him slightly. "You ever think about stuff like this?" I asked quietly. He looked over, brow furrowed. "Stuff like what?" "I don't." "No, being out here, away from everything, makes you think about things differently, doesn't it?" He was quiet for a moment. Rain drummed steadily on the roof above us. "Yeah," he said. "It does." His voice was softer now, more thoughtful. "It's like, out here, there's no pressure, no one watching. Just you, and whatever you've been trying not to think about." I swallowed. "Exactly." He rolled onto his side again to face me, head resting on his arm. We were so close now I could see the flecks of green in his hazel eyes. His gaze searched mine like he was trying to read something behind. "What have you been trying not to think about?" he asked. I looked at him, and for a split second I almost said it. I almost gave in. "You, us. Every time you touch me like it means something." But instead I said, "Nothing important." He studied me for a beat longer, and I thought, just maybe, he saw through it. Then he reached out and gently flicked my forehead. "Liar." I laughed, more out of nerves than amusement. Takes one to know one. His expression softened, and something passed between us, unspoken, fragile. The kind of thing that would disappear if you tried too hard to name it. Outside, thunder rolled again. "You know," he said, voice low, "I used to wonder if you were into me." My breath caught. "What?" He shrugged, suddenly shy. "I mean, there were little things. The way you looked at me sometimes. The way you got all awkward when I sat too close. I figured, maybe. But I didn't want to push." I stared at him, my mouth dry. "And now?" I asked, barely above a whisper. Evan's eyes didn't leave mine. Now I'm not wondering as much. My heart slammed against my ribs. It felt like the ground had shifted beneath us, not in a terrifying way, but in the way a cliff gives just enough to show you there's something below, something waiting. He didn't move. Neither did I. But the space between us didn't feel safe anymore. It felt electric. The rain didn't let up for hours. The sky had gone completely dark, and all we had between us and the cold night was the sleeping bag draped over our shoulders and the dim orange glow of the lantern beside us. We hadn't said much since Evan's comment. Now I'm not wondering as much. His words circled my thoughts like embers refusing to burn out. Every time I thought I could settle, the memory sparked again, lighting my chest with something too dangerous to name. He was still lying beside me, arms folded behind his head, staring at the ceiling of the lean-to like the knots in the wood held answers. His knee occasionally bumped mine when he shifted. Each time it happened, I told myself it didn't mean anything. But the way his foot lingered beside mine now, it meant something. I swallowed hard, my mouth dry from the silence and everything I hadn't said. I couldn't keep this up. The pretending. The holding back. Not after that look he gave me. Not after what he said. I turned toward him. "Evan?" He looked over immediately, like he'd been waiting for me to speak. "Yeah." My throat tightened. The words lodged somewhere between my lungs and my tongue. My heart was beating so hard I was afraid he could hear it. "I've been thinking about what you said," I murmured. You said you used to wonder if I was into you." He didn't say anything at first, just held my gaze. My voice shook, but I pressed on. I am. I didn't want to mess up what we have. But I trailed off, hating how fragile I sounded. It's been killing me. Evan sat up slowly, one leg bent, arms resting on his knee. He didn't interrupt, just listened. I pushed forward, my voice low but steady now. "You don't know what it's like, wanting to be close to someone who doesn't even know they're pulling you in every time they laugh or smile or touch your arm like it's nothing." I told myself it would pass, that it was just a phase, or admiration, or whatever. But it didn't pass. I looked down, breath shaky. It just got worse. There. I said it. The truth, laid out in the open, bare and exposed like a wound. Silence, hung between us like fog, thick and unmoving. When I finally dared to look up, Evan was staring at me with an expression I couldn't read. Not shocked, not angry, something else. He exhaled slowly. "Why didn't you tell me?" I was scared. Of what? I gave a quiet laugh, but it was hollow. That you'd stop looking at me the same way. That I'd ruin the one thing in my life that actually made me feel like I belonged somewhere. Evan's jaw tensed. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, like he needed to physically brace himself for what he was about to say. "I think I knew," he said quietly. Or part of me did. But I didn't want to face it. "Why not?" He hesitated. "Because I didn't want to question what that said about me." I blinked. "Wait, are you saying—" "I don't know what I'm saying," he admitted, his voice rough. "I've never thought of myself as anything other than straight. But then, you'd laugh at one of my dumb jokes and I'd think about how good it felt to make you smile, or you'd fall asleep in the car on some road trip and I'd catch myself glancing at you too long, wondering why it felt right." My chest tightened. Evan ran a hand through his hair. I tried brushing it off, told myself it was just how close we were, that it didn't mean anything. His gaze lifted to mine again, steady, serious. But lately, I'm not so sure anymore. The wind rattled the trees outside, but I barely heard it over the sound of my heart pounding. He leaned toward me just slightly, close enough that I could feel the warmth of his breath. "You scare me," he said. That made me flinch. "Oh, no. I mean—" He shook his head, frustrated. "You make me feel things I've never had to name before. And I don't know what that makes me, but I know I don't want to lose you either." I stared at him, barely breathing. The lantern cast soft shadows across his face, highlighting the vulnerability in his eyes. This wasn't some playful moment. This wasn't teasing or curiosity. This was real. "You're not going to lose me," I whispered. "I don't know what I'm doing," he admitted. "You don't have to," I said. "I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give. I needed you to know. That's all." But when I turned to lie back down, to ease the pressure and let him have space to think, his hand shot out and grabbed mine. "Wait," he said. His fingers threaded through mine. I froze. "I don't want to pretend I don't feel something when I do," he said, his thumb brushing my knuckles. I looked down at our joined hands, then back up at him. His face was closer than before. His eyes wide, searching, scared but sure. "Can I—" He paused, voice barely audible now. "Can I kiss you?" I didn't trust my voice. I just nodded. Slowly, carefully, he leaned in. His hand came up to cup the side of my jaw, warm and tentative. He paused just before our lips touched. His breath, mingling with mine, giving me one last chance to back out. I didn't. His lips brushed mine, soft at first, uncertain, then again, firmer, with more intention. His hand slid to the back of my neck, pulling me in gently as we kissed. Slow and exploratory, like we were both discovering something neither of us had planned to find. When we pulled apart, his forehead rested against mine, both of us breathless. "That wasn't nothing," he murmured. "No," I whispered, my heart finally calming into something like peace. "It really wasn't." We lay in silence after that kiss, not awkward or tense, but quiet in a way that felt right, like we'd finally let the truth exhale after holding it in for too long. Evan still held my hand, fingers lazily tracing along mine. Every few minutes he'd glance over at me, and I'd catch him smiling like he wasn't sure if any of this was real. "You good?" I asked, voice barely above a whisper. He nodded slowly. "Yeah, I can't believe I kissed you." "Same." I chuckled. "Honestly, part of me thought you were going to run off into the woods screaming." He snorted, nudging me with his shoulder. "That would have been dramatic even for me. But not out of character." "Fair." I laughed, and something about it made his eyes soften. He shifted onto his side to face me fully, propping his head up on one arm. "I meant what I said, by the way," he said, a little more serious. "Now, this isn't just some moment. I'm still figuring it out, yeah, but I'm not going to pretend it didn't happen. I wouldn't ask you to." He studied me for a second, his thumb brushing over the back of my hand again. "So what does this mean now? For us?" "That we talk. We figure it out. One step at a time," I said. "No pressure. No rush." Evan looked relieved. "Good, because my brain's kind of spinning. Like, I want to lean over and kiss you again. But I'm also terrified that I'm going to mess everything up." "You kind of already kissed me," I teased. "Right, but now I know I like it." He smirked. "So it's more dangerous." Laughed again, and he leaned in to press a quick kiss to my temple this time. It was soft, warm, and so unlike anything he'd done before. I froze, not because I was scared, but because it felt intimate, like something couples do without thinking. And maybe that's where we were heading. "I still don't know what to call this," he admitted. "We don't have to call it anything, yet. But I want to." "Eventually," he said, voice quieter now. "I don't want to hide this. Not from myself. Not from you." Something swelled in my chest, hope, maybe, or the echo of something deeper that had been waiting for this moment. "For years." "I'm here," I said, brushing a stray curl from his forehead. "I've been here." He closed his eyes briefly at my touch, breathing out slowly. "I always felt safe with you, even when I didn't know why. Maybe now you do." He looked at me again, closer this time, noses nearly brushing. "I think I'm starting to." For a while we didn't talk. We just lay there, pressed shoulder to shoulder, watching the shadows on the lean-to roof shift with the flickering light. His hand stayed in mine, and when I shifted slightly to get more comfortable, he tucked his arm around me like it was the most natural thing in the world. Eventually, he said, "Do you think this changes everything?" "Maybe," I murmured. "But maybe that's not a bad thing." He gave a soft hum, thoughtful. "I guess if we survived that god-awful hill climb earlier, we can probably survive feelings too." "Wow, so romantic." "I try." I turned toward him again, my smile meeting his in the dark. "We'll figure it out. Together." Evan nodded, his eyes lingering on mine. "Yeah. Together." And when he kissed me again, gentle and unhurried, like he wanted to memorize the shape of this new chapter, I let myself believe it wasn't just the end of something old. It was the start of something real. By morning, the fire had long burned out, but I didn't feel cold. Evan was still curled up beside me, his arm thrown loosely over my waist, breath warm against my neck. At some point in the night, we'd shifted closer. No awkwardness, no second-guessing, just quiet comfort. The kind you fall into when there's finally nothing left to hide. Birdsong filtered in from the trees, a soft breeze brushing through the canvas opening of the lean-to. Everything smelled like pine and dew and possibility. I moved slowly, careful, not to wake him, but the moment I tried to sit up, his hand found mine under the blanket. "Hey," he mumbled, voice thick with sleep. "Where are you going?" "Just stretching," I whispered, squeezing his hand. His eyes opened halfway, and he smiled. Sleepy, soft, utterly unguarded. "You stayed." I nodded. "Did you think I wouldn't?" "Part of me thought you'd wake up, realize last night was a mistake, and bolt." I leaned in, brushing my forehead against his. Not even tempted. He grinned, and then, without thinking, brought my knuckles to his lips. It wasn't a grand gesture, but it floored me anyway. How something so simple could feel like a promise. Eventually, we packed up camp. Neither of us said much, but the silence was different now. No longer heavy with unsaid things. It was easy, warm. When I bent to roll up the sleeping bags, Evan joined me, nudging his shoulder against mine. "Hey, I've been thinking." I glanced at him. "Yeah? Would it be totally cheesy if we came back here someday?" His voice was shy but hopeful. "Like, same spot. You and me." I couldn't help but smile. "You planning an anniversary? Already?" He flushed, laughing. "Too soon? Maybe, but I kind of love it." He looked down, that little self-conscious smile tugging at his lips again. "I know we're just starting, whatever this is. But last night felt real, you know. And I want to keep feeling like that. With you." I stepped closer and tugged his hoodie string. "Then you will." We made our way down the trail, our packs lighter somehow, even if they weren't. The air was brisk, sun filtering through the trees in golden rays that danced along the path. Somewhere behind us, the lean-to waited in silence, holding the night we first became more than friends. Halfway down the trail, Evan reached for my hand. Just like that. No words. No hesitation, and I let him. We didn't say much after that. Just walked, fingers tangled, steps in sync. But every so often, I'd catch him looking at me from the corner of his eye, like he still couldn't believe any of this was real. Near the bottom of the hill, he tugged my hand to stop me. One more thing. I turned to him, curious. He pulled out his phone, flipped to the selfie camera, and raised it between us. We never got a picture. I blinked. "You want to document this? Us, in flannel and 5-day stubble?" "Yes. Because I want to remember it. This exact moment," he said, eyes serious. "Before the world creeps back in." I leaned into him, letting our heads touch. "Then take it." The shutter clicked. He looked at the photo for a second, then smiled and whispered, "New favorite." I didn't need to ask why. I already knew. We kept walking, the world slowly opening up again beyond the trees. There would be questions ahead, doubts, maybe even mistakes. But as we stepped into the sunlight, hand in hand, I wasn't afraid. Because, For the first time, we weren't just hiking a trail, we were walking into something new. Together.